Good evening and welcome to the first episode of Face to Face in 2025. Joining me is Michał Broniatowski, Editor-in-Chief at TVP World. Hello, Michał. Welcome in the new year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. So, the year begins with anticipation of Donald Trump's presidency, but it's not just anticipation. There is some action also taking place. And January 1st saw the end of Russian gas supplies to Central Europe through Ukraine. How significant is this development?
This is one in a series of developments which I think are signs of defeat of Putin's big global policy, because he wanted to achieve to stop NATO from supporting Ukraine or even Ukraine in entering NATO. Instead, he has Ukraine at the steps of NATO. NATO increased, was joined by two neutral until recently countries, Finland and Sweden, doubling the border with NATO. You know, on January 1st, Putin's Russia lost one of its key geopolitical weapons. Typical thing for them to use economy as, in fact, nearly military weapon, which was a gas blackmail, which has been working for the first 2 decades of the century. Numerous times we witnessed Putin just turning off the taps with gas in alleged conflicts with Ukraine, but in fact in order to destabilize the rest of Europe, including Poland, including other countries of the Central Europe.
In the end, he even managed to destabilize Germany.
Yes, but this time his tool was removed by Ukraine, which stopped it.
Do you think this is permanent?
I think it's permanent until the war is on, because of course gas transit is a good business. It's I don't know, $4 billion for Ukraine yearly, which is now cut off. But Russia lost much more than billions for the possibly sold gas in Europe. It lost one of the key weapons which it was using to blackmail, to attack, in fact, Europe.
But, you know, Russian gas flows to Europe have been curtailed before. This is like the final, maybe not even final, because there is still Russian gas flowing through the Turkey Stream pipeline. It's much smaller, so the capacities are smaller, but it's not that Russian gas disappears from Europe. And on the back of this, of course, we have this diplomatic quarrel, if you will, between Ukraine and Slovakia and Hungary as well.
Prime Minister Fico was...
the Slovak Prime Minister. Mm-hmm.
Yes, was nearly hysterical in the last few days, because he realized that these gas transit will stop, but saying everybody that it means a disaster for Slovakia. Nothing happened.
And for Europe.
He was especially, crying here and there, and then begging Mr. Putin during his visit in Moscow to support him in this horrible situation. But, the Slovakia and Mr. Fico was weeping about it, not because they lose gas, because they have big reserves. They can get it from other directions. The thing is that they lost transit of the gas, which was transited via Ukraine.
Yes, also, and he will have to pay probably a little bit more for gas now.
Exactly, but this transit is $500 million for such a small country.
Right. Okay. But, what I find surprising in all of this is that Ukraine was telling Slovakia and Hungary and other Central European nations that it was going to stop deliveries from January 1st. And then Mr. Fico wakes up a week before.
You ask an obvious question. Yes.
It was a rhetorical question.
Okay. Well, he was playing a game. At the same time, he was filling his big tanks underground. He has about 70%, they are 70% full, which means several weeks of no problems for Slovakia. And he was playing a game, probably in cooperation with Russia, and also in order to subordinate Ukraine.
But in any case, the Russian dominance of the European gas market is probably over.
It is over.
And there is another factor, the Trump effect, if you will. Mr. Trump promises to deliver more LNG, so liquid gas, to Europe. He actually, in his first term, was criticizing Europe for making itself dependent on Russian gas. So now Russian gas is not flowing. He's promising more drilling for gas and oil. So more bad news for Putin.
And a lot of good news for America.
And for Europe, or not?
Well, Europe has finally, Europe, or the main consumers in Europe, the major countries in Europe, have got the supplies from numerous sources, not only Russia. This is a problem, of course, great problem for Germany, which was using Russian gas as a cheap source of energy, lowering cost of production.
The Polish presidency has promised to lower energy prices as part of its Polish EU presidency. So is a grand bargain with Trump over LNG supplies part of this formula to get energy costs in Europe down, or is it premature?
I don't know how can we predict prices in future in view of
well, normally
tariff.
bigger supply would mean...
but he's warning that he will start this tariffs war.
But that's going to be on imported goods from Europe, not on LNG exports.
But this will create, of course, counteraction on the part of Europe. So
but
this
Europe would be
escalation of prices here and there.
But I think Europe would have no really space to increase tariffs on LNG exports from the US, because then no Russian gas, no US gas.
But
that's a disaster for the European
Gulf
economy.
Gas, Kuwaiti gas, you can lots of sources of that. It's very interesting thing which we probably will be discussing in the next few months, the situation with Trump's plans to skyrocket the tariffs against China and against Europe.
Okay, so moving on, we'll stick to Mr. Putin for a while. He seems to be getting ready for Mr. Trump's inauguration, which is coming fast. And of course, he takes seriously Mr. Trump's promise to end the war quickly. So he's returning to his bargaining position of a maximalist bargaining position. He's saying a change of, effectively, he's asking for the government in Ukraine to change. He's saying neutrality. He's saying basically Ukraine cannot defend itself. It has to reduce its armed forces. Even for Mr. Trump, this is probably unacceptable. So what is he trying to achieve, Mr. Putin?
I think it is posturing before sitting at the table. You come to the table with unacceptable demands, and then you agree for something less, which is exactly what you wanted to achieve. But on the other hand, it's interesting that he's doing things like that, which is indicating that he is ready to talk.
I think so. Many analysts are skeptical about Putin's. Many analysts believe that he moved so far up this tree that he's finding it hard to climb down. And some analysts are warning that he's serious. He really wants America to fulfill these conditions, in which case it's a problem for Mr. Trump.
It's not a problem for Mr. Trump. It's if Russia doesn't agree, he has another plan B. Plan B means giving more weapons to Ukraine. Don't forget that Russia is more than an ally. It's a client of three key enemies of America: China, Iran, and North Korea. It's dependent on their supplies and even on soldiers North Korea. So he really, despite his claims that he can stop the war in 24 hours because he has good relations with Putin, he cannot afford getting into bed with Putin in this situation. So, on the other hand, this posturing by Moscow is a very good news for Ukraine, because Zelensky can tell Mr. Trump, well, we are ready to talk, but look what is this
demands. And also, is this a factor that Mr. Trump will no longer be beholden to his electorate, to his more radical electorate, the MAGA, Make America Great Again crowd, which has been very skeptical about helping Ukraine because he's not running again. And we saw that already with the dispute over immigration of skilled labor into America, where he sided with Elon Musk rather than the MAGA diehards. Is it a possible scenario also when it comes to Ukraine?
We are all the time talking about his business-like approach towards politics. So this big cry against even qualified immigration is hysterical and ideological. And he understands, of course supported by arguments from Elon Musk, that these people are coming to help American economy. That's why he probably supported
So
Musk.
You're saying he's going to act rationally also when it comes to Ukraine?
I think he's a businessman. He will use common sense. For him, arming Ukraine or forcing Europe to arm Ukraine, which means Europe will have to buy these means from America, is a good news for American economy.
Okay. Michał, another key event last week was the growing backlash against Russian hybrid operations in the Baltic Sea. The Finns boarded a Russian ship that broke some undersea cables, which is a repeat pattern now. On top of that, the Finns discovered that the ship was loaded with spying equipment. But isn't NATO reacting too slowly to these developments?
I think that NATO member, Finland, showed other members how to behave. Because, you know, this goal for Finland, which divides Finland from Estonia and the rest of Europe, is so narrow that, in fact, if any ship goes from St. Petersburg to Baltics, it has to go via territorial waters of Finland. So it makes it really easy for them to board such ships. And
I appreciate that the Finns gave everybody a good lesson. But, you know, I just wanted to throw a quote at you from James Apatharai, who is Deputy Assistant Secretary General of NATO, who said last week that the hybrid war by Russia turned NATO into a boiling frog. So in other words, you know, things that NATO would not have accepted 5 years ago, NATO is accepting now because Russia is just gradually escalating. And he said that, you know, there has been a rise in more kinetic, he called it, acts like cutting undersea cables, sabotage against buildings, and planting of explosive devices inside aircraft cargo. And he says, you know, we can count dozens, up to 100 for sure. And what happens? No Article 4 consultations, no action.
You know, I think that this frog has realized that it is being
Is it ready to jump?
And I think you are quoting Deputy Secretary General of NATO, which means that they are well aware of that, and then they now connecting dots, and we'll see action very quickly.
So do you think this Polish proposal for a Baltic...
Exactly, this is what I wanted to follow on, is the proposal by Prime Minister Tusk to start increased patrolling and joint patrolling of Baltics. It will be realized, and you know, and it will be done in a much bolder way, because it is easy to you know, when you cut a cable, you know immediately that it was cut, and if you see a ship in this location, you can just board it, because doing this, according to marital law, is act of war. So boarding ships which are at the same time, as in this latest case, tankers, which were underinsured. Many of them are
very old and
very old, and they are switching off the markers. So theoretically, nobody can track whether they go, their movements. So lots of crimes on the way, and good reasons to board these ships.
Right. Finally, I'd like to ask for your opinion about Hungary, where Viktor Orbán found a powerful domestic adversary, Magyar, the leader of the opposition. He is a former associate of Mr. Orbán, and he issued this New Year video, which went viral in Hungary, in which he accused Mr. Orbán of betraying the conservative cause, betraying Hungary's interests, and called on the Prime Minister to call an early election. What do you make of this? What's happening there?
I think he finally got a good competitor, a guy who can challenge him in such a way. 2 million views on Instagram, I think, where he published this
manifesto.
His manifesto is like something like 80 million in America, because Hungary is a small country. People are listening, and this guy Magyar is taking advantage of some disillusionment of the society. He's been in power for 15 years, and people, despite all this propaganda of success of Orbán and his cronies, is contrary to what they see. They have problems with supplies.
Yes, the economy is stagnant for many.
Yes, and of course, people have access to internet and they can see what's really going on.
So is Mr. Orbán a proof that at the end of the day, domestic elections are run on domestic issues rather than on his grandstanding on the international stage?
Of course, the same concerns Mr. Trump. When we are asking if Mr. Trump will lose on not keeping his word on international politics, it's wrong, because those who
always domestic politics.
Exactly, those who voted for him don't care about. As long as he doesn't send American boys to the front.
Thank you very much, Michał, for these comments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching Face to Face, and see you next week.